And it's Madison with Future Farm Hemp in Baldwin, and today we are going to talk about the history of hemp in the United States. It's something we haven't covered before, so we're going to do a brief interview because it's a huge topic. I could talk about it for hours, but it's important to understand the journey of hemp overall, for one, but also just within the past couple of hundred years. Especially because it helps explain why we abide by some of the rules and regulations we do today, why there's some hesitancy, and laws are constantly changing. We all know this, and in a time where full or partial legalization of the plant in any form is a reality, it's good to know where you stand, and it's good to have accurate information. I'll also link some good articles to go through if you're more interested in this topic as well. We're going to start at 8,000 BC. I know that sounds scary because it's a long, long time ago, but hemp, we know, was probably the earliest cultivated plant for textile fiber. Archaeologists, for a fact, found a remnant of hemp cloth, clothing, and clothing-like materials in ancient Mesopotamia, and that is actually Iran and Iraq of today. So that dates back to 8,000 BC. We also believe that hemp is believed to be the oldest example of human industry. So for processing, I think that's really interesting as well. We had it down back then. There's been a lot of time in between, and we're just getting back into it here. So evidence does show it was also found around that same time in China and Taiwan. So there's a lot of area it covered. There's a lot we don't know, and I'm going to skip around a little bit, but I want to touch on the main points here and kind of draw up some sort of timeline. In the 700s BC, that whole century was when we first saw paper mills appear in China and in the Middle East, and they were first powered by people, manual labor, and then they figured out how to have it be animal-powered, water-powered, other ways of processing hemp to make it more efficient for people to use. In 850, so we skipped ahead quite a bit, but we do know for a fact that Vikings used hemp for a number of things, which I find fascinating because it's durable, it's fast growing, they really had it down to a science, and they spread it to Iceland and beyond in their journey. So that's when we really started to historically see it spread out throughout the globe and actually be able to track it. In 1533, again, we're jumping ahead quite a bit, but in 1533, England fined farmers if they didn't raise hemp. So it was standard that you do, and you could be fined if you don't, because it was such a cash crop that it didn't make sense for people not to grow it if there was land readily available and people willing to work, and it really just didn't make sense not to. And the United States actually echoes that a couple hundred years later. So in the 1700s, early laws required American farmers in several colonies to grow hemp for the same exact reason. Easy to grow overall if you've got good soil and good water drainage. A lot of the time, it was an either-or situation. If you have land, you're either going to grow hemp or you're going to grow another cash crop that can benefit your people and yourself and your family. So they did see that a lot, and that was in the early 1700s. And then in 1776, as we all know, the United States founders wrote the early drafts of the Declaration of Independence on hemp paper. And we always talked about that in classes and civics and history in high school and college, and I always kind of thought it was a rumor, but as far as I know, that is an accurate stance. In 1916, skipping ahead a bit again, the USDA publishes findings showing that hemp itself produces 4 times more paper per acre than trees, and that is still accurate to this day. Hemp grows much quicker than trees. It doesn't damage the soil, meaning you can plant it over and over and over again for production and processing without having to worry about long-term effects on any fertile land. Very useful. As any farmers may know, you have to do crop rotation. You really have to pay attention to the health of your soil. And hemp is one of the best things you can plant, both for having sturdy soil, being able to grab onto that, fighting erosion, as well as pulling toxins from the soil as well. In 1937, the Marijuana Tax Act placed a tax on all cannabis sales, including hemp, and that was heavily, heavily discouraging the production of hemp. So we're starting to see a little change here. Other industries moved in at this point, and the narrative started to change a little bit. In 1942, the USDA initiates the Hemp for Victory program. I think that's an amazing thing to look into. If you're even remotely interested, definitely look that up a little bit. I'll post a link as well. But this leads to more than 150,000 acres of hemp production in the United States. Now, that was 1942. They reversed their stance when they realized they needed hemp for the war effort. The Department of Agriculture started to heavily promote hemp and started pushing various benefits and publishing, various benefits that hemp had to offer. So especially for fiber, it was kind of like we talked about centuries before, where it didn't make sense not to grow it. It was an easily grown plant for the most part at our disposal, and so it really made sense to go hard there, and there were incentives to do so. The peak of the hemp promotion was when the US government released a pro-hemp documentary, actually, which really fascinated me, and that was called Hemp for Victory. And that encouraged farmers throughout the Midwest and Southeast, to support the war. And this led to over 400,000, almost 500,000 acres of hemp being planted during 1942 and 45. So 3 years, almost 500,000 acres, just blows my mind. It's funny how things change so fast, isn't it? In 1957, farmers plant the last commercial hemp fields in the United States in Wisconsin. So I think that's a little interesting tidbit of Wisconsin history there as well, and I'd like to learn a little bit more about that. In that time, from 1957 to 1970, there was a massive cultural shift because in 1970, the Controlled Substances Act classified hemp as an illegal Schedule I drug. That sounds scary because it is. And that's what we're in the process of reversing now. So those drugs are not things we can study. They are too dangerous for human consumption, of course. And that isn't accurate. That's not what hemp falls in line with, especially if the THC level is below 0.3, as it is in here in Wisconsin. The 2018 Farm Bill was signed into law on December 20th, 2018, which actually, that amendment removed the plant along with any of its seeds and derivatives from the Controlled Substances Act, which was a huge win for the hemp industry. But for a while there, the strict regulations imposed on cultivation and industrial hemp, as well as marijuana, so the psychoactive and non-psychoactive forms, really shook the country in a way that was unnecessary because there were no really laws defining what was okay to consume, sell, cultivate, study. For a long time, there was a gray area, and that leads to some of the misconceptions and confusion today, of course. So that's where we're at now. That was in 2018. So like I said in the first video, the 2018 Farm Bill was signed in December 20th, 2018, and that allows us to do what we do today. So I think education is the best thing we can possibly do to talk about, open people's eyes as to what it can do for you, also what it can do for our country, because it's really, really fascinating, and it's not easy, of course, but I think it's right in front of our faces. I think we're moving in a good direction, but communication is key. So if you have questions at all, please let us know. We'd love to address them. Like I said, that's where we're at now. There's a possibility that since we have 50 different states in the United States, we have 50 different variations of law regarding hemp and cannabis, which is what has happened. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of uniformity, and that can cause some confusion moving from one state to the other, what's legal, what's not. If you want to have a job in this industry or you want to be involved whatsoever, you need to be very, very aware of your surroundings and aware of what the regulations are. Because like I said, they're constantly changing, and I'm not going to lie, it's difficult to keep up on at times. It's always beneficial to be up to date in whatever state you're in. And I make this sound like some big scary thing because this is the industry I'm in and it's the industry I love, but I really just want people, if you're even remotely curious, to dig in a little bit. Google's a great tool. We all have it at our disposal. Us here at Future Farm Hemp will do everything we can to assist you in answering any questions you may have, both about the production about it, the consumption, what it is, where it came from. All of us really, really love to talk about it, so please don't be shy. Thanks for watching. That's all I have for you today. You can submit questions through Facebook, through email, over the phone. I'll add all that information, of course. If you're looking for any terminology help, I touched on that in the last video, which I believe is number 5. What is psychoactive versus non-psychoactive? What's the difference between cannabis, hemp, marijuana? It all can be a bit confusing at first, but we really want to help you out with that. So we would love to talk about it and answer any questions you may have at all. Don't forget you can use the code freebie10 for our online shop and get 10% off anything your heart desires. So thanks for watching. Let me know if you have any questions, and have a great weekend. Bye.